Good afternoon and welcome. I am today obviously back in Colorado. It's a rather pleasant late March day. And I'm sitting on a big chunk of wood, a beam essentially. It'll be a log for my log cabin that I cut down in episode 28, I believe it is, and I'll post a link below to that video if you'd like to watch that. Back in the day, logs were hand hewn, and the one thing that just absolutely amazes me is what a consistent 6 inches thick the logs are on my cabin. Now, I don't have anywhere near the skill set that they did back in those days, so I use my bandsaw mill here to cut out a log that is about 6.5 inches in width right now, and it's I think about 10 or 11 inches in what will be height. The log will actually sit like this. And you can look back and you can see that there's some bark and some wane still in the log. The log was fairly crooked, so I didn't get a piece that was free of wane, and for a log it's actually probably all the better. So what I'm going to need to do is to round the edges to where it'll look like a log. I will probably have to take a chainsaw and cut it down in width a little bit, although maybe not. Since this is a bottom log, the stone wall that is supporting one end of the cabin is partially collapsed, and it wouldn't take a lot to remove even more. So I can use this log and then rebuild that, maybe not quite as high as what it was before. Today I'll be using some of the tools that they may have used back in the 1800s to do the hand hewing on the log. I have here a draw knife that is sharpened just on one edge, and it is used for stripping the bark and shaving small amounts of wood off the edges as was needed. Then I have a felling axe, and a felling axe, this one I actually recovered from the site. It had been buried and there's some pitting in it because of rust, and I put an edge back on it to some degree. It needs to be sharpened a little bit more before I can use it, but a felling axe is sharpened on both edges, and I'm not sure the age of this one, but I would suggest that it's probably well over 100 years old. I did put a new handle on it. And then a hatchet, only this I guess really would be better classified as a miniature broadaxe, in that it's sharpened just on one edge. This edge here is left flat. Now, I do have a broadaxe too, which is actually what they would have used after the tree was on the ground to chop it down to the dimensions that they wanted. And they would use it, a broadaxe. A broadaxe, again, is about twice the width of what this is, and they would have used it coming from both directions to chop notches down into the log, 3 or 4 inches deep, whatever it took, and then use the broadaxe to split off the pieces in between, and then to use it to shape the log a little bit too. The other thing, I do have a broadaxe, and broadaxe, it's original to the property, probably over 100 years old, but it is in Arkansas, so I won't be using that today. The other tool that I will be using is an adze, and what it is, I'll get it out here before we get started. An adze is like an axe, only it is perpendicular. The head is perpendicular to this, and it works really well for shaving down across the grain and some into the grain too. An adze, like the felling axe and this mini felling axe, or not felling axe, but broadaxe, this mini broadaxe, the adze is sharpened only on one edge too. We'll take a closer look at that in a little while. I need to put an edge on all my tools. We'll set this up in a little bit different position and then start shaping it. Since I use the bandsaw mill, you may or may not be able to see there are saw marks on this. And in order to make this somewhat match the logs that are on the cabin, I want to get rid of all those saw marks and use these tools to be able to do that. So stay with me and we'll get started here in a few minutes. I'm going to try to do this holding the camera with one hand and this mini broad axe with another. Something that we need to pay attention to when we're doing this work is the direction of the grain. The wood is going to tend to want to split with the grain, and if we look at this one here, we can see, and I'll exaggerate it, that the grain is on a bit of an angle like that. That means that most of the work that we do with the axe is going to want to be in that direction, not in this direction. There may be some chopping that is done to get it started, but if we were to continue with that, it would tend to follow the grain. So again, we may do some notching with that and then do most of the splitting from that angle there, that we're going to where we're coming, to where the grain pattern is coming off of the log rather than going onto it. Let's continue. I think I'll start by getting rid of a little bark. I can also use the draw knife to help clean things up a bit too. This works better pulling than pushing, but I have my back to you. Bark is a lot more prone to rust, or prone to rot, so we want to make sure that's all gone. I'll continue with the axe. Now in the end, we want this thing to look like it was done entirely with axes, hatchets, draw knife and such. So having axe marks in there actually just adds a little bit of character to it. The one part that is nice to have smooth is right where this face meets this curved edge. And the reason for that is when we get to chinking later on, the chinking will come flush with the outside edge here. And the smoother that is, the nicer job we can do of making that chinking look good. So I'll do a little bit of work with the draw knife now. It had gotten pretty darn windy, and it's still pretty breezy, but the wind knocked my camera over, so I shut down for a little while. Clouds came in and actually probably make for better light for photography anyway, so here I am. This is the adze that I had told you about. Again, sharpened on just one edge, with a slightly rounded head to it so it doesn't cut in deep on the edges. The one thing about the broad axe and this mini broad axe is being tapered on only one side. They are made either left-handed or right-handed, and typically the hole through the center of this casting is equal. So if you want to use it as a left-hander instead of a right-hander, all you have to do is to pull the handle out and bring it in from the other side and redrive the wedge. Now this one's set up for a right-hander and I haven't changed that. I'm a little bit ambidextrous. I probably can hit a little harder with my left hand than my right, but for now I'm leaving it as it is. Now a full-size broad axe weighs about 3 times what a felling axe does. Maybe even more than that, maybe 5 times. So you got a lot of weight behind it. So I'm trying to do something here that looks like it was done with a broad axe, and some of my axe marks are a lot shorter than what a broad axe would be, but I can't, I just don't have the, well, I may have the power behind me, but I'd be worn out in no time. So what I am doing is to chop into the wood and then taking a 2-pound hammer and splitting the piece off, and it's actually leaving a cut that looks a lot like what a broad axe would do. And as I said at the start of the video, you do have to pay pretty close attention to the grain and which direction the grain is going so that you're not digging so deep in the wood that it won't split off. So we'll go ahead, time-lapse this for a little while and see how I do. See how long it takes me to wear out. Both the battery on the camera and I are just about out of power, so I need to take the camera in and charge it up again, charge the battery, and recharge my energy, and hopefully finish this side of the log tonight. I am real happy with the way that it's looking, though. It is looking like a hand-hewn log and a relatively consistent thickness. I'm taking off anywhere from almost 0 to a ½ an inch, so by the time I do that on the other side, I should be just about right at 6 inches thick. I'll be back when I'm able. I did get a little more done last night before I quit and ran out of daylight. And this morning, it's a little chillier than what it was forecast to be, so I'm going to kind of take my time at doing this, but here I go. What I am finding works well in adjusting the depth of this cut is, as I go in with the axe initially, this back edge, or the edge away from me, is a little bit deeper than the edge close to me. So if I want to go deeper, I push the axe handle that direction. If I want it to be a little shallower, I pull it back, and I can do that with my leg as I'm beating the axe into the cut. Sometimes I have to add a little extra weight if I've got my initial angle a little bit too deep. The grain pattern now has switched to where I am better off working at it from this side of the log since I'm left-handed. I guess truly this is hand hewn, but definitely not the way in total that they would have done it back in 1850. I'm going to clean off the remaining bark here, clean the log up just a little bit, and then it'll be time to flip it over. All right, well, I have finished hewing this side to the end, and I think before we go on, what I'll do is I'll pull the camera from the tripod and we'll have you take a look all the way along this, and please let me know in the comments if you think that this looks like it could have been done in 1850. Let's go. There we go. Sorry if that wasn't too smooth. I was stumbling over track rails. All right, I'll roll this thing over and get started on the other side. Well, the log is finished. It's ready to be placed now. The one thing that I do have left to do is to spray this log with boracare. And what boracare is it is a wood preservative. It will prevent, or at least minimize, the amount of mold, mildew, and that sort of thing that can attack a log as it weathers. It also prevents boring insects and their larvae like termites, carpenter ants, and that sort of thing. So it's an awesome thing. For being able to do historic restoration, what I really like about it is that it still allows the wood to weather to a gray color, which is pretty important in being able to eventually match. Now that matching is going to take years, of course. The one thing that is really, really hard to realize is just how much work it is to get a log to this condition. I've seen it done on other YouTube videos. I actually did it on a pine log about 10 years ago at a state park in Colorado. And that pine log was much easier to hew than what this white oak is. It was really work. But something that amazes me, and I really enjoy now, having gained that knowledge, is the effort that it took back in 1850 to do something like this. And as I understand it, the old timers, they could hew half a dozen of these in a day's time, which to me is just almost unbelievable. But from everything that I've read, it is true. Now, I know that there is a certain amount of skill and a certain amount of muscle tone that develops from doing this, so If I were to do this again, it probably wouldn't take me nearly as long as what this one did. There was a lot of experimentation to get it to this degree, but at least I got it. So, let some traffic pass. So I guess that does it for another episode, and I appreciate you being here. If you either learned something or was entertained watching me fall off the end of the log or whatever, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and please tell a friend. And as we come to the end of this here, I'll go ahead and spray this log. Have a good rest of, well, until I see you again.